Hi, this is Bob Weller here to talk about my new book, Stravinsky and Cubism. Um, the way I got interested in this subject, it started more than 40 years ago when I was an undergraduate. I was looking at a lot of Stravinsky, particularly the early ballets, Firebird, Petrushka, and the Rite of Spring, and I was trying to figure out the harmonic idiom of those pieces. And I read a lot about it. There's quite a bit written about it, and I didn't feel like any of the explanations was totally sufficient. I had another question at the same time, which I thought was unrelated, which was how would it be possible to measure the exact amount of dissonance in any 12 equal-tempered notes? And I thought at first that the questions were unrelated, but it turned out that once I had solved one, I sort of had the key to the other. What happened was I began researching this question of dissonance to find a way to measure dissonance, and I found something that enabled me to do it, at least to my satisfaction. It was a practical method for dealing with this kind of measurement that worked, that I could use, not a technical or scientific method, but just something practical that a musician could use. And I wrote a book about it in 1982. It's called Quantum Dissonance, and it's available on wellermusic.com. It's a free download if you'd like to read it. But essentially what it says is that the harmonic idiom of the 20th century changed with Schoenberg and Stravinsky, and it moved to a more complex harmonic arrangement that was no longer based on tonal combinations or centric tonality, but was based on a discrete level of harmonic tension, which I call the first level. This is from Quantum Dissonance. Once I had this tool, Quantum Dissonance, I was able to go into the Rite and look at it, and what I discovered was that the Rite had organized, that the harmony was organized on this discrete level of harmonic tension, which I call the first level. Here's a good example, or possibly this one. That's a famous one. Or here's another one. Those are all first level chords, and that turns out to be the harmonic idiom of the Rite of Spring. And it's almost like the harmony, once it gets to a certain level of complexity in terms of the amount of dissonance that's present in a chord, it starts to self-organize around this discrete level of harmonic tension. It moves away from a centric or tonal organization towards this organization on a discrete level of dissonance. So I really didn't think about quantum dissonance for almost 40 years, and then in 2015 I became aware of 3 books that influenced my thinking about it quite a bit. They managed to put it in a historical context and a cultural context which I had not seen in the 80s. And one of these is Art and Physics, Parallel Visions in Space, Time, and Light by Leonard Shlain. Another one is Einstein and Picasso by Arthur Miller, Space, Time, and the Beauty That Causes Havoc. And this is about the parallel trains of investigation by Picasso and Einstein in the early part of the century, particularly around the issues of multiple perspectives and simultaneity. We're talking, of course, about the development of Cubism by Picasso and the special theory of relativity by Einstein. And then the third book was The Fourth Dimension in Non-Euclidean Geometry in Modern Art, Linda Dalrymple Henderson, written in 1983, right after I finished Quantum Dissonance. And this explains how these ideas of the fourth dimension and non-Euclidean geometry influenced the development of modern art. This would be influencing the development of Cubism in particular. Cubism is generally given as running from 1907 to 1914. Picasso and George Braque are the primary architects of it, although it did continue longer than that, and the influence of it has continued to this day. So today I'd like to talk about one of the Cubist metaphors that Stravinsky uses in the Rite of Spring and also Petrushka, which is the concept of simultaneity. This is the use of simultaneous perspectives This is drawn from Cubism. In other words, viewing an object from many perspectives at once. And it was Picasso's innovation to merge those perspectives so that they appeared simultaneously. This accounts for the strange appearance of many of his portraits where we're seeing the front view and the side view and other views of the subject, almost as if the subject was moving in time as well as space. And this is one of the express aims of Cubism, to depict an object more realistically as it actually is in its total dimensionality, space-time, in the space-time continuum, which would mean that it moves in space and time. It's not static, in other words. So this concept of simultaneity was used by Stravinsky right at the beginning of the Rite, right in the opening. This is the opening material. So that's a Russian folk song, which Stravinsky got from a book that he mailed away to Russia for. And he never gave any credit to the people that wrote the folk songs. They were just folk songs, I'm assuming part of public domain, such as it was back then. But he was very concerned about protecting his rights as an author, and also wanted to be seen as an innovator. So he claimed that these were original compositions, although according to Robert Kraft, they were not. They were just folk songs that he borrowed. And the number of folk songs in the Rite is estimated to be about 19, but it's not actually known how many there are. But anyway, the melody clearly cadences on A minor. It does that over and over again. The first note of the accompaniment is C sharp, which is drawn from the key of A major. So we're seeing simultaneous versions of A. We're seeing A minor and A major at the same time. The second phrase starts out with a C sharp and G sharp in the accompaniment, which is drawn from A major. So we're seeing simultaneous versions of A major and A minor. And then it cadences down an octave on the A major, while this the top part cadences in A minor again. So clearly a Cubist influence there. There, of course, are other alternate explanations for that harmony, but when you see how consistent it is throughout the Rite, you begin to realize after a while that this was what he was thinking, at least as far as I can tell. Another example from the dances of the young girls. This is the famous Rite of Spring chord. That's the famous Rite of Spring chord that attracted so much attention from everybody. And it came to Stravinsky in 1910 while he was at work on the Firebird. It was the first musical idea that he had for the Rite of Spring, fully 3 years before the premiere. This is you could describe this chord as E major on the bottom and E flat 7 in the top. And that's fine, and that was the kind of explanation that I saw when I was doing the research originally, but that really doesn't tell you much of anything about it. You could say it's a bitonal chord, and that explains it, but it doesn't really explain anything. What I figured out was that it has a certain discrete level of harmonic tension, the first level, like I mentioned. So this is, if we crunch this all up together, make a scale out of it, we get something like this, which is E major with an extra, B leading augmented with an extra F in there, or an extra E. So it's a 7-tone scale, leading augmented scale with an extra note, and that tells you something about the original harmony, this harmony, which is that it's dissonant enough so that it does not fit into a normal 7-tone scale, major, minor, or leading augmented. So that was another example of first level, what I call first level harmony in the Rite, which is the organizing harmony of the Rite. Here's another example. This is from mystical circles of the young girls, this opening chord, you can clearly see that this is a simultaneous version of B. In other words, we have B major in the left hand and B minor in the right hand. So it's this cubist concept of simultaneity. The second chord is, which is sort of like a version of A minor and A major simultaneously. So there's a lot of harmonic consistency there because they have exactly the same level of harmonic tension. That's how we hear them connected. Another example from the opening of the second movement is this use of 3 minor triads. The thing is, I think that Stravinsky was trying to deal with the concept of, I've been using 2 triads in various combinations like this, and what if I tried to use 3 triads? And so the triads that he picked were D, E flat, and E. So right next to each other. If you put them all together, they form what would be called, in terms of quantum dissonance, what would be called a third level chord. So it's much more dissonant than the first level harmonies of the Rite, and so it would kind of interrupt the whole texture of the Rite. So the way he dealt with it was he's using 3 minor triads, but they're floating over this D minor root. So it sounds like this. So you can see up here is an E flat minor triad and the D flat minor triad, and then in the bass is a D minor triad. So, and then the second chord is going to be, I had to arpeggiate that because I can't reach all that. This is also a first level chord. It's part of part of an 8-tone diminished scale. That one. So again, we have that clear consistency in the harmonic idiom. We're hearing a connection between these as constituted here. They're first level chords because they're not occurring all simultaneously. And then the second one. So you definitely hear a connection between the harmonies just by virtue of them having the same, approximately the same level of dissonance. One final example is drawn from Petrushka, and there's the famous Petrushka chord, which is it's 2 triads, occurs in various combinations, but what we have here is a F sharp triad and a C triad. So in other words, there are 2 major triads that are a tritone apart. And this is a cubist concept, the simultaneity of 2 distantly related keys. These are about as distant as you can get, F sharp and C. And so the idea of viewing them simultaneously would be definitely drawn from Cubism. And there are many different combinations, of course, of the use of this chord, but it's throughout the piece. That's going to do it, I guess, for this session. And in the next session, I'll be discussing influences on Cubism and how Cubism got started, what were the mathematical and physical discoveries that caused artists to want to express themselves in this way. And that'll be for the next one. Thanks for listening. Bye.